following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back into SEC Talk week number 7. The weeks just keep flying by. We're officially at the halfway point of this college football season. I feel like every time that we do this
so
show,
crazy.
It's always just flying by. It's still definitely the best time of the year. We'll recap week number 6. We had some wild performances. Georgia's dominating performance against Kentucky. Alabama escaping a victory in College Station. We'll get into that. But Wade, how was your weekend?
It was very good. It felt like fall here in Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
No home game, of course, but some good weather and an early kickoff. So we were able to watch LSU play against Missouri and then take on fall activities like the pumpkin patch and corn maze and all that kind of stuff. So it felt like fall, and it's crazy, man. Halfway over, you say. I can never believe it,
Yeah, it goes by way too fast. And yeah, I stepped outside. I was like, oh my gosh, this just feels so much different.
We're
We've
not
been
in
stuck
Kansas anymore.
in the 90s and the hundreds for a couple of months. But yep, we got a cold front. We'll see how long it lasts. Hopefully a couple of weeks down here. We definitely need it. But let's get right into it here on SEC Talk. Let's get into that AP Top 25 poll. And there's been some couple of changes, at the top, especially with the Texas loss. Oklahoma is looking like one of those teams that are going to be really legit in the college football landscape. But number 1, Georgia, they remain the same. I just don't really see anyone else coming close to them, especially with Texas losing. Michigan, they're looking also good. Ohio State, got tested against Maryland. They escaped. But, man, Georgia really earned it. That was definitely their best performance so far. Alabama stayed the same at number 11, but they are definitely looking like the team to beat in the SEC West. Everyone was writing them off after the Texas loss, but it's looking like Jalen Milroe and the squad is starting to play their best football at the right time. Ole Miss moves up a couple of spots after their 7-point victory against Arkansas this past weekend, sitting at number 13. Tennessee gets the luxury of not even have to play a game this week. They're on the bye, and they move up a couple of spots just because of what happened around them, especially Notre Dame falling to Louisville. And then you also had other couple of squads. Washington State lost to UCLA. So you had Tennessee moving up to number 19. LSU moves up a spot after their very impressive performance against Missouri. Missouri was definitely a team that we were definitely high on, so definitely a great win for them on the road, especially after the performance last week against Ole Miss. So they find themselves at number 22. And then Kentucky, they remain in the top 25 spot barely. I don't know how that they're in the number 24 spot after getting boat raced by Georgia. But the Cats get in at number 24. Missouri was the lone team to fall out of this. So what are your overall thoughts of the AP poll and the SEC teams heading into week 7?
I think they got it right. I think that teams like Missouri and Texas A&M, they're kind of right on the edge. They could be teams that we see ranked later in the year, but for now, I think they got to stay out. And then I think Kentucky sticking in the top 25 is fine. I mean, it was a absolute beatdown against Georgia, but it was a road game, and really once Georgia had found their rhythm, they just ran with it, and just nothing you can really do in that situation. So I think if they were to play anybody else in the top 25, they could make it a good game. Georgia's just that good. So I'm fine with that. And then, Tennessee at 19, LSU at 22, I think that's fair. And Ole Miss, sitting right outside of the top 10 with Alabama, definitely could get interesting. I know that Alabama, Ole Miss have already played, but LSU and Alabama haven't. Of course, Ole Miss and LSU have. So there's still a lot to shake out between those three teams.
Yeah, definitely a lot to shake out both in the East and the West. I both think that still divisions are still wide open. And then we're getting closer to the first college football playoff poll getting released this season. So we have 6 teams from the Southeastern Conference in this week's AP Top 25. All right, let's move on. Get to our reminder. We do this every week just so we want to get everyone involved, whether you're watching us on Facebook or on YouTube. If you have, feel free to leave any questions, say go dogs, go Tigers, or roll tide after the big victories. Leave it down in the comment section. We definitely like to have our viewers involved in the show. All right, let's get into our fan favorite segment, SEC Fantasy, presented by our friends over there at Mahler Bros Golf. Like I mentioned last week, with the temperatures starting to drop, it's definitely feels like golfing weather. Finally, we definitely been waiting for it. Use code BELLYUP at checkout. That's 15% off at MahlerBros.com with code BELLYUP. Okay, before we get into the results of week number 6, let's get into the rules. And we are going with a new rule here just before we do this. We are going to be adding the total yardage. So say if you're a quarterback, you also get the passing yardage and the running. And then if you're a wide receiver, you get your receptions, or if you run the football. We're not going to do special teams quite yet. We did have one player have a couple of yardage, Anaya Smith, but we're just going to stick with the
Offensive yardage.
Yeah, offensive yardage for clarity.
And then defense, I guess total yardage would be the right term, right?
Yeah, defense is going to stay the same. It's just going to be the amount of total yards that they give up to the opponent. But nonetheless, we are sticking with one quarterback, a running back, a receiver, and a defense. And once again, you cannot use a player you picked from last week. So I was able to get the victory last week. We'll see how it shakes out this week. I will go ahead and say it. Yes, we do have our first negative score of the week. And Wade, you were lucky enough to not be in that department. And so why don't you go ahead and see how your team did in week number 6.
All right. So my hunch was right. Brady Cook was going to have a really good day against LSU, and he did. He put up 404 yards through the air. Unfortunately for him, he did throw a pick 6 that kind of sealed that game, but I don't think you can hang that loss on him by any means. He stretched the field quite well. Luther Burden looks like he might be the next Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase. He still has another year in college, so that's a really good duo right there. I have a feeling we'll see both of those guys in SEC fantasy for weeks to come. Logan Diggs also played in that game on the LSU side. He had 134 total yards. I think it was all on the ground. I don't think he had any catches. It was a very impressive day for him. He's asserted himself as the LSU Tigers lead back. Trey Harris, a little bit of a quiet day. I told you it would be a toss-up between him and Jordan Watkins on who's wide receiver 1 for Ole Miss. It was Watkins' day to shine, as he had about 100 yards. Trey Harris had 26. I'll take it. And then the Florida defense, they did a pretty good job. I thought this was a more complete effort from Florida all around. We'll, of course, recap the game in a little bit, but the defense played a big part in that. They held Vanderbilt to under 20 points and 340 yards. So that gives me a total of 224. I'll take that, mid-season SEC games all around. I think that's a pretty good showing.
I'll tell you what, you've been very consistent in SEC fantasy, and to get 224 this late in the game. I do have a note for you. Brady Cook did have 411 yards, but he also had -7 rushing yards. So
yes.
you got negated a little bit, but as you see, that was not going to be the difference in this contest, as you absolutely ran away with SEC fantasy in week number 6. Let's go ahead and take a look at my team, and you're going to see right away where my mistake was, and it was the defense. Mississippi State's defense giving up 413 yards and 28 points to Western Michigan. I think that Mississippi State is just, we're probably not going to see that logo ever again this season, the way that they
maybe on Will Rogers' helmet.
The disappointing is Jackson Dart only getting 186. 33 was on the rush. He had 33 yards rushing, 150 yards through the air. It's definitely not the performance. I probably drank too much of the Kool-Aid of Jackson Dart. He looked phenomenal against LSU's defense, but Quinshon Judkins, I was all in on Ole Miss on this one. Judkins had 83 yards rushing, 20 of those coming in the receiving game. Anaya Smith, he had a couple of key catches against Alabama's defense. Anaya Smith, though, was held in check. 88 yards, and as you see, our first negative score of the season comes in week number 6. Hey, we made it this far, but negative 56 is my score. So I will hope to bounce back. But Wade, you're going to head into week number 7 with the first overall pick. You ended up taking a defense, so you'll find out a little bit later on who you pick. But let's go on now to the week 7 draft. And you're going to go with a guy, man. If we didn't have the total yardage, we probably wouldn't see Jalen Milroe, but you're going to go ahead and say it. Sorry again. I completely misspelled his last name. So sorry, Mr. Jalen, if you're watching
I need
this.
more points.
Yeah, you need more points. But talk about Jalen Milroe's matchup against Arkansas.
Yeah, I think this is exactly why we brought this rule in. I mean, Jalen Milroe is playing pretty good football for Alabama right now, and part of his talent is running the football, and a big part of college football is being a dual threat. So I think to showcase the true landscape of the conference, we got to do total yardage, and Milroe is a good bet at that because he can run for 100 yards on you, and maybe his max will be 200 yards passing, but I think he's got a really good matchup against Arkansas this week. I know that they kind of shut down Jackson Dart, but I just think Alabama's finding their groove, and I think he's finally confident that he's the quarterback for this team. So I'm going to ride the hot hand in Milroe.
I think you just countered my pick because I picked Jaden Daniels before you, and you were like, who can I
need
get
some of those
a
rushing
clone?
yards.
Who can I get a clone of him? But man, the way that Jaden Daniels has been playing, he has been carrying the load for this LSU team. Without him, I don't know where this team would be. It definitely wouldn't be good. But he had to battle through a rib injury, and he still shined. 15 carries, 134 yards on the ground for Jaden Daniels, and 200 yards through the era. So I know that the Auburn LSU game, it's always a defensive battle. It's always the one that's coming down to the wire. But I just think that this LSU offense is one of the best in the country. They're definitely rolling at the right time. So give me Jaden Daniels. I think that he's going to have a big game, especially in front of the home crowd. I think, it's been a couple of weeks since LSU has seen, their team in Death Valley. So I think that the fans will definitely be riled up. So give me Jaden Daniels to counter your pick in Jalen Milroe. So definitely this is going to be like the two key players that you're going to see use that total yardage. So expect some big numbers for both of those guys. And now let's go on to the running backs. Yes, he is back. Ray Davis gets his 3rd consecutive appearance here on the show. And we also have a new face, Dejuan Edwards of Georgia. So talk about Ray Davis's matchup going up against Mizzou.
Yeah, I picked Ray Davis in this one. He had a week off last week. Nobody took him against Georgia.
Yep.
So that's that's fair. And I think he held his own against Georgia in this one. These two guys squared off on Saturday. Edwards had the better game, and that's why you're going with the hot hand. But for Davis, I think this pick is pretty simple. He is Kentucky's offense. They didn't have the luxury of running him a whole bunch against Georgia because that's Georgia's strength, and they were down in this game big, so they needed to throw. But he should be back in control. This week they play against Missouri, and Missouri just let up 140 yards to my guy last week, Logan Diggs, as well as 130 to Daniels. So I look for Leary and Davis to both, maybe flirt with 100 yards rushing.
You're going to continue to go after that Missouri rush defense. I definitely don't blame you. They've definitely been shaky. I'm going to go with Edwards. He is coming off of a solid showing against Kentucky. Going up against Vanderbilt, I'm going to go up against Vanderbilt's rush defense. Montreal Johnson just had an insane game. I almost went with him. I thought that I think that Florida's run game is definitely going to have to get going if they want to take down South Carolina. But I'm just going to go with Edwards. I think this is going to be a game that they don't rely too heavily on Carson Beck. This one's probably going to be over by halftime. Let's just say that. So I think that Edwards is going to be used a lot in the running game. So give me Dejuan Edwards. So 2 SEC East quarterbacks are featured heading into week number 7. Now let's go on to the pass catchers. And do we have any new faces? We do have at least one of them. Luther Burden makes his 2nd appearance here on the show, but a new face, Ricky Pearsall, the Florida star wide receiver going up against the South Carolina defense, has been shaky.
Yeah, I think this one's all about the matchup for me. I like Pearsall against the Gamecocks. We saw Tennessee and Mississippi State have success in the air against the Gamecocks, and I just think Pearsall is a shifty receiver. They can line him up inside or outside, and he's a good route runner. So I look for him to pop off and have a big day against the Gamecocks and kind of make himself known here on the show.
Yeah, Pearsall is definitely going to make a name for him. I'm going to just go with Luther Burden. I think I'm just saying the mindset. I'm off of a negative one. I might as well just pick, some of the best position players. So I think that Luther Burden, one of the best wide receivers in the conference, going up against a Kentucky secondary that did struggle against Georgia. I do think that this is definitely going to be a close game, a high 20s, maybe low 30s, both offenses. We'll get back on track in this one, but I think that Burden for me is definitely the pick. So Pearsall and Burden are the two wide receivers. Now let's go on to the defenses. And like we saw last week, picking a bad defense can definitely ruin your scores. So you're going to go with the Georgia defense, probably the best defense to take in this week's schedule going up against Vanderbilt.
Yeah, and look, I'm going to propose a new rule to you on the spot. I think we're going to call this one the Vanderbilt rule. And in years past, we've done a good job of this, but I think that we have to include at least one player or team defense from each school over the course of the season, because I don't know at this point if either of us is going to pick Vanderbilt in any phase of SEC fantasy, but we've sure been picking against them a good bit. So get your Vanderbilt pick in at some point this season. Has to happen. Because, man, we've been picking pretty much any defense that's playing against them, but I would take Georgia any week. They're kind of coming into their own. They've let up some yardage in the past against teams like UAB, but I look for them to absolutely shut down Vanderbilt. And, I think it's all dogs.
Yeah, I think that was definitely the best pick. I'm going to go probably the second best pick on the weekend. If you look at the key matchups that you have, don't really want to touch the Auburn LSU game because you still never know what's going to happen. So I'm just going to go with Alabama's defense. I think that Georgia's obviously the number one SEC defense, but I think that Alabama is definitely making their mark. They're coming off of a great showing in College Station against Texas A&M. This week, they're at home against Arkansas, and Arkansas is a team that is in the downward spiral. They have lost 4 straight games. So we'll see if they can make it 5 straight games or can they pull off the upset. But I just think that Alabama's defense is playing to an elite level of status, especially with Dallas Turner in the middle, then Kool-Aid McKinstry and the secondary. So I'm not going to touch Mississippi State's defense. I'm going to go for a safe pick, it feels like, and go with the Bama defense against the Razorbacks. So that is our teams heading into week number 7. Tune in the next week's show to see how our teams did. Hopefully we're both back in the positives, specifically me. So we'll see who takes the cake. So now let's go on to our SEC Week 6 recap, and that is presented by our friends over at SeatGeek. There's a lot of sporting events. MLB playoffs are starting. The NBA season is about to start, and NFL and college football season is right here with us. So use code BellyUpSports for 20% off of your first purchase. That is SeatGeek. Okay, let's get into our 11 a.m. games. We had 2 of them. First one was a non-conference matchup. Western Michigan went on the road to Starkville to play Mississippi State, and the Bulldogs were able to bounce back after 2 consecutive losses. 41-28 was your score. And this was just a get-right game for Mississippi State before they head back into SEC play. Obviously, they are on the bye this week, so they will enjoy a week off before hosting Arkansas or going on the road to Arkansas. I have to check that schedule. But they start off slow, especially their defense. Their defense continues to be a problem. I think that Mississippi State fans are definitely calling for either their defensive coordinator to be fired or Zach Arnett to be fired. Mississippi State fans or both are is definitely not happy with what's going on in Mississippi State. With the offense, the offensive changes. 41 points against Western Michigan. I mean, that's just doable. So what are your thoughts about Mississippi State? My thoughts aren't very good. I think that this is probably going to be your last place team in the SEC West, maybe along with Arkansas. But what's your overall thoughts on Mississippi State after this victory?
I just don't think they have much of a direction, and that's understandable. I mean, look what happened. I think you did have to hire within, and you give Arnett a chance. And if he's lightning in a bottle, you struck, maybe the next Dabo Sweeney or something that kind of is a homegrown interim coach sort of deal. But I don't think he's got a good enough grip on this program. The offensive identity changes very much game to game, and then defensively, they've just really been bad ever since that LSU game. So I don't have a lot of faith in this team. I think that they'll probably look to fire their coach pretty early on in the coaching carousel so that they can go snag, the best mid-major coach or, one of the better coaches on the market, because teams like Michigan State are also going to be looking for a coach as well. So they'll want to get ahead of the curve on some of these other teams and hopefully entice somebody to come to the SEC.
Yeah, we'll definitely see what happens and if they go in that direction, and if there's any names out there, because we haven't seen anybody really get fired this season in the college football landscape. We'll see if Mississippi State turns in that direction or not. But let's go on now to the next 11 a.m. game, and this was very important for both teams. Missouri was coming into this matchup undefeated. We talked a lot about LSU last week after that embarrassing defensive performance against Ole Miss, but LSU gets the bounce back victory, 49-39. This is probably going to be a tradition with LSU this season. You got to score at least 49 or more points to beat them. It feels like, especially with the way that their offense is rolling and the way that their defense has been playing. But this was not looking good for LSU fans. Missouri got out to an early 22-7 lead. If you remember, LSU won the toss and they elected to receive. That was definitely, a smart decision at, the way that your defense has been playing. You want to put your offense on the field, go up 7-0. But that was not the case as LSU went 3-and-out. And Missouri and Brady Cook, man, they were just unstoppable in the first half. You got to talk about Cody Schrader. He was very unstoppable. But for some reason, Missouri just went away from him. Even though he was gashing them, Luther Burden, he had over 140 yards. Schrader had over 130 yards. Your guy, Brady Cook, he had 400 yards. So Missouri's offense was definitely humming. But those two interceptions were definitely costly. The first one by Harold Perkins, Jaden Daniels was able to connect with Mason Taylor. And then the second one with Major Burns, the pick six. And that was coming into this matchup, Brady Cook didn't throw an interception this whole entire season. He threw two. So you definitely got to give credit to the LSU defense. They made the timely turnovers. But, man, Jaden Daniels, I know that LSU has 2 losses, but I think that he has to be in the Heisman discussion the way that he's been playing. Not only through the air, he's definitely been improving from last season to this season. So LSU gets the bounce back victory. LSU fans were saying, fire Brian Kelly and all this. This always happens with LSU fans after a loss. But what are your overall thoughts in this game between the two Tigers?
Yeah, I think there was some improvement, especially in the second half for LSU. The first couple drives, I didn't think so. I mean, I thought I was watching an extension of the Ole Miss game from a week ago. So I was impressed with how they turned it around in the second half. And you said it, during SEC Fantasy, where would this team be without Jaden Daniels? And the answer is probably 1-4. And they would have lost this game for sure, because it did take a while for the defense to settle in and make some big plays, but Daniels was able to keep them off the field and let them rest and pace the Missouri offense the best he could and keep them within striking distance. So this was a really good team effort from LSU. I like that the defense did get a stop at the end. I think that gives them some confidence going into next week. And I think next week's a get-right game for the defense. I mean, Auburn, they're pretty vanilla when it comes to offense. So I think that that's a game that LSU can build some confidence on after an up and down showing here, but can't complain about a road win. That's hard to do in the SEC. So overall, I think things are okay in Baton Rouge. I think that this team still has a 10-2 ceiling, maybe 9-3. So a lot to play for here. They only have the one conference loss, and Alabama game is still to come. You would need a little help against Ole Miss, but there's still a lot on the line.
Yeah, still a lot on the line. The SEC West division title race is still up for grabs. It's definitely pretty much a win-out situation. The playoff still there. If they win out, they beat Georgia, I definitely think that they would have the resume to be in. So there's definitely still a lot to play for this LSU team. If you look through the schedule that they already went through, like the quarterbacks that they had to play, I think that they get a little bit of break, with Peyton Thorne, and then Army comes to town, and then you get the bye week, and then you have to face off against Jalen Milroe. But I think that they really went through already their gauntlet of their schedule, and they're sitting at 3-2. If they're 1 or 2 stops away from being 4-1 and beating Ole Miss, but that was not the case. But on the other side, Missouri, this is your first loss of the season. I don't think that the sky is falling for Missouri. This is still a very good football team. They do have a very key game coming up against Kentucky. This is where Missouri's season really started. And looking at their schedule, they lost this one against LSU. Now you get Kentucky. Then in a couple of weeks, you get Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina. This is where that Missouri could either be, a 9-win team, or they could fall all the way down to a 7-win team. So I don't think that the loss is, the sky's falling for Missouri. I still think that this is a very good football team, but they definitely have to take care of business against Kentucky if they want to stay in the SEC's race with Georgia, because the way that Georgia looked, it's either going to be 0 losses or 1 loss for them. At very worst, 1 loss for Georgia, especially with the way that they look. But definitely a key victory for LSU, 49-39 against Missouri. So let's go ahead and move on now to the 2:30 game slot here. And this was a battle for the SEC West. This was one of our 2 SEC Talk game of the weeks. We said whoever wins this one is probably in the driver's seat for the SEC West, and that was Alabama. I try to tell everybody that, I don't know, it was pretty much the same scenario that we had for Alabama and Ole Miss. Everybody was like, oh, okay, let's go ahead and pick Ole Miss. Alabama was looking terrible against South Florida, and then it's the same scenario. Alabama's only a 2-point favorite. That's got to mean something. Maybe the wrong team is favored. Nope. Alabama gets the victory 26-20 against the Texas A&M Aggies. And this was what I expected, a defensive battle. 2 of the best defenses. Alabama has talent on 3 levels. Texas A&M has one of the best defensive lines in the country. Max Johnson, though, was under pressure. I think that the offensive line really struggled for Texas A&M throughout this game. Whenever you get Max Johnson under pressure, it's pretty much a wrap. But I got to give credit to Alabama, especially Jalen Milroe and Jermaine Burton, the Georgia transfer from a couple of years ago, had his best game of his career, and he definitely put on a show for Alabama fans. So I think that, it's been a couple of weeks. I think that Alabama fans have forgotten that Texas loss. They're definitely feeling confident in their team. But this was definitely a huge win for them, especially go on the road in a hostile environment, going to the 12th man. So do you think that with this win, Alabama's in the driver's seat for the West?
Yeah, I think, statistically they are. And I think just passing the eye test they are. I think that they've got their mojo back. It's not Alabama that, we've seen with terrific passing quarterbacks like Tua and Mac Jones and Bryce Young. I mean, this team's going to be a little bit more like they were under Jalen Hurts, and those teams were just fine, got to a national championship game, and I think that Alabama's on that trajectory. If they keep winning, they'll get their shot against Georgia, and Texas A&M was probably one of the last teams in their way of doing that. Of course, the game against LSU, they'll have that one at home, but then after that, will have already played Ole Miss, LSU, and Texas A&M, and pretty much will be walking to Atlanta.
Yeah, you make a good point. They pretty much have been through that. I feel like their only test is that LSU game, but they do get it at home, and there's going to be some revenge factor for that team, since they lost on that heartbreaking fashion, that 2-point conversion. So I think that Alabama is definitely in a great spot. The 1 loss is definitely good for them. It comes out of the conference. It wasn't an in-conference. They're undefeated in the SEC West, while everyone else has at least 1 loss on their resume. So we'll see how the SEC West shakes out. But my pick right now would definitely have to be Alabama, the way that they are playing. So let's move on now to our SEC conference slate here in week number 6. And the next game takes us to Vanderbilt in Florida. We are going to be talking about Vanderbilt, and it's not going to be positively once again. Florida definitely looked dominant, 38-14. They definitely needed this win. Florida's offense, like I mentioned, Montrell Johnson went for over 170 yards rushing. Trevor Etienne did not play in this game, so we saw Johnson really be that bell cow running back. Florida's defense, they definitely had to bounce back. Had a couple of weeks, against Kentucky. They looked very bad. Against Tennessee, they look very good. So it's been very up and down for this Florida defense, but this was definitely needed. Vanderbilt, they started the season 2-0, and then they just have 4 straight losses, so they now sit at 2-4. We'll still see if they go with their guy in Clark Lee, or do they try and go with a different direction. But definitely a huge win for Florida. Not really to stay in the SEC East race. They do have one loss in the conference, and they still have a lot, of challenges left ahead of them. This week they go on the road to Columbia, and they still have to play, Georgia and also Missouri. We'll talk about this a little bit, but Florida getting the victory, it's definitely not a surprise to both of us.
No, and this was a get right game for Florida. They, of course, got curb stomped by Kentucky on the road just a week ago. So to bounce back against Vanderbilt, very good win for them. And for Vanderbilt, yeah, we just don't know what the direction of this team is, right? I mean, they couldn't handle business in the out of conference slate. We know it's not going to get easier in the conference slate. They got Georgia this week, so maybe it gets a little easier after that. But I don't know what this team's direction is. I'd like to believe in Clark Lee. I think that he's got limited resources. AJ Swan's had a half decent year, but there's just not enough talent on that team right now to really feel confident picking them against the majority of the conference.
I tried like so hard to like talk really good about Vanderbilt, but it's just so hard. I think I'm just like looking at it. What are we gonna say about them when Texas and Oklahoma joins the conference and their schedule just gets harder and harder every year? So we want Vanderbilt to be good. Yes, we're an SEC show, but man, this is just rough to see this program really struggle. They had those years in the early 2010s. But there we go. They make it to a bowl game pretty consistently under James Franklin, and Franklin moves on to Penn State. And, they just been through a couple of head coaches that just can't really get the job done. So we'll see if Vanderbilt, is able to turn the corner. They're sitting at 2-4. I had expectations, they went into this season, last season they were 5-7. I thought, they return AJ Swan. They lose Ray Davis in the transfer portal. That was definitely huge. But I think that their defense is where they definitely have some main concerns. If you don't have a defense in the SEC, you're not going to win many ball games. So let's go on now to the next game here in the slate. This is where we get into our primetime matchups. And boy, this was a primetime game, but definitely not what we were expecting. I kind of had it in the back of my mind. We talk about Kentucky every year. They're 5-0. They get to this point, and then Georgia just boat races them. And it happened again as Kentucky, number 20, went on the road to Athens between the hedges, and they found out. I think that this what we're talking about every single week on the show, that we're waiting for Georgia to have this dominating performance. Well, here it is. No slow starts. They were up 34-7 at the half. This was over before Kentucky even kicked the ball off. I mean, Carson Beck, that was just the best performance I have ever seen in the Georgia uniform. I think that if he plays like that, you might as well just hang another banner. Georgia's going to win another national championship. Brock Bowers, he is just not only the best tight end in the country, he quite arguably could be the best player in the nation. He just continues to be a mismatch against defenses. Georgia's offense made Kentucky's defense look like a Pee Wee football team, the way that they were dominating them. So 51 points, definitely a very dominating and a very statement victory over Kentucky. People are saying in the media, oh, is Georgia, deserving of the number one? I think Kirby Smart and the boys shut that up after they just whooped on Kentucky. So you definitely have to be impressed with this Georgia dominating performance against Kentucky.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, we were waiting for them to assert themselves as number one, and here it is, 51-13. Carson Beck really impresses me. I think he's entering the conversation as a top 3 quarterback in the SEC if he's not already there. And I think you could argue the quarterback play is better on this Georgia team than it has been on this national championship era of theirs. Nothing bad to say about Stetson Bennett, but he wasn't a game-changing talent. I think that Carson Beck kind of is. He came in here as a 5-star recruit. He was expected to be that guy, and he just had to wait for his turn. And you're really starting to see some of that 5-star talent on display. So I really like the direction of this team. I think that this is one of their steepest hurdles until the SEC championship game. So no real big road tests other than Tennessee. And I think this team is just in cruise mode, but they need to keep the foot on the gas. It is the SEC. Crazy things can happen.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll see. They continue this dominating performance, but I was definitely impressed with the dogs this past Saturday. So we will move on now. Let's go on now to the SEC West. We had Arkansas at number 16, Ole Miss, and I tell people the line was 13. I just knew that Arkansas was going to cover. I didn't say that they were going to win. But this game is always crazy, always coming down to the wire. But man, this is like the most like low scoring that if like I'm so used to like 52, 51, like 49, 52 in this series, but nope, it looks normal for once. 27-20. And this was a back and forth battle. Ole Miss and Arkansas's defense definitely came to play Ole Miss's defense, giving up over 49 points last week. Definitely looked much improved their defensive line was able to create more pressure. You didn't really see a big gain from Rocket Sanders. KJ Jefferson, he had over 200 yards passing. And the other side, Arkansas's defense really kept Jackson Dart in that passing attack really in check. But man, Arkansas, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago that they were just going through this gauntlet schedule and they just have not passed any of their tests. They went 0-4. And it doesn't get any easier because you got to go to T-Town to face off against Alabama, and they're feeling really good about themselves. So Arkansas and Sam Pittman, that could definitely be a seat that could definitely potentially be warming. Fayetteville, they are not happy with what's going on. I know that they've had a tough schedule, but to start the season 2-5 in Arkansas, that's just unacceptable for what's happening there. But you got to give credit to Ole Miss. Ever since Alabama beat them, they've just been a team that's been playing with their hair on fire. They still have some tests remaining, but this is definitely a team that could be a 10-2 or a 9-3 team at the end of the season. So once again, I'll ask you, what were your overall thoughts between Ole Miss and Arkansas, and do you share the same, concerns about this Arkansas team right now?
Yeah, this is a tough loss for the Razorbacks. I mean, I felt like they were one or two plays away from pulling off the upset, and this was a pretty good performance from them. KJ Jefferson played so well all night, so for him to throw that interception that pretty much ended the game, I felt really bad for him. Just kind of looked like a misread between him and his wide receiver. So not how you want to see the game end, but I thought they battled really well. And yeah, you got to play Alabama next. So the storm's not over, but hopefully after that they can just settle down and, win a couple conference games and get to a nice bowl game. And this is another team where I don't know if they have the right head coach for this team. I mean, all these teams need to look at the expansion and the future of college football and, go into a 12-team playoff. The goal for every single SEC team should be to break that top 12. There's an increased chance for you to make a playoff run, and you need to have the coach and the players in line to achieve that goal. And I don't know if Sam Pittman's the guy. I think that Arkansas is like one of those fringe teams that every year they kind of make a run, but just kind of like in this game, they couldn't close it out. So I don't know what the direction of this program is. I really don't.
Yeah, definitely concerning with Arkansas, and it's definitely more concerning, especially with two programs that are really looking good. With Texas and Oklahoma, especially with Oklahoma, the way that they've been looking, and Texas with Steve Sarkisian there, I think that the recruiting trail is rich in that state. So we'll see what direction Arkansas turns to. So that is it, I believe, for our Week 6 action. So we'll see how we did in the Week 6 picks. And Wade and I both went 5-1. The one loss for Wade was that Texas A&M pick, and my one loss was the Missouri over LSU. Chet, the upset specialist, went pretty bold. I respect it. He got the A&M one wrong. He got the Kentucky one wrong. That was definitely way off. And then Arkansas, he almost had it. Like you mentioned, KJ Jefferson was just one play away from really making that a game. But 3-3 for Chet and 5-1 for both Wade and I. So let's go ahead and turn our attention to week number 7. And our week 7 preview is presented by our friends over at Fanatics. I'll go ahead and slide over our link down there. So Fanatics, we're into the fall month. Maybe you need a new sweater or something you could support and rep your favorite sports team. So use our link down there. It's scrolling across your screen. And like I mentioned last week, they definitely have a lot of good deals on Fanatics. So let's go ahead and make our picks for SEC week number 7. And we have early morning kickoff. So if you're a fan of either of these teams, definitely get your morning coffee ready. Number one, Georgia heads on the road to Vanderbilt. And this isn't even a really a home game for them. If you really watched any of these games between Georgia and Vanderbilt, that stadium will be all red and filled up with Georgia fans. So you can pretty much just say Vanderbilt at Georgia. So who do you have between the dogs and the doors?
Got to go with the dogs. I mean, this is just two teams in totally different places and directions. Georgia definitely looks like the number one to me.
Yeah, no letdown here for me. I think that Georgia continues their dominating factor. Look for the backups to be in by the third or fourth quarter. I don't think that this one's going to be close at all. So give me the dogs. Pretty easy. Yeah, this is a pretty easy pick. Sorry, Vanderbilt, to be so negative on you every week, but your team just doesn't give us.
It's okay. We will pick you in SEC fantasy at some point.
Yes, we will try to fit that in. Another 11 a.m. game. You can blame this, Alabama fans, on Arkansas. Arkansas coming into this game, like we talked about, 4 straight losses. Meanwhile, I feel like these two first matchups are one team going in the right direction, another team just trying to hang on for dear life. So Arkansas and number 11, Alabama. Past couple of years, Arkansas has played this team close. Do you see that this year?
I think they're pesky, but like you said, Alabama's just hitting their stride. I don't think it will be too crazy of a blowout or anything. I think it'll kind of be like the Ole Miss game in a sense, but maybe Alabama scores like a late touchdown or something. I'm going to go Alabama 34, Arkansas 20.
Yeah, I think that, Arkansas, I just don't know the way that this mindset is. It definitely doesn't feel good being on a 4-game losing streak, and it definitely doesn't help you going to a team that is playing red hot. So I'm going to go with Jalen Milroe in this offense. I think that they score at least 30 points against Arkansas. I think that Arkansas or KJ Jefferson, the talent is there if Rocket Sanders can have a very big game, but I just don't see it. Alabama's defense has been playing really out of their minds the past couple of weeks after Alabama. So give me the Tide to keep on rolling on. Chet, no upsets this week as he's also going to go with the Crimson Tide. So 2 clean sweeps off of the bat for the SEC Talk crew. And we're going to move on now to the SEC Talk game of the week. It is Texas A&M heading on the road to number 19 Tennessee. And I made this game of the week because if you remember the past couple of years, this was an absolute insane classic between Joshua Dobbs and Trevor Knight. Yes, those were the 2 quarterbacks. Alvin Kamara was also in that game. So it was a lot of offense. We'll see if there's a lot of offense. Max Johnson, we'll see if that Texas A&M offense can bounce back. Tennessee and Joe Milton coming off of the bye week. So this is a team that is going to be playing with fresh legs. So who do you have between the Aggies and the Vols?
Well, see, there's your problem with these mega conferences. I mean, we just watched those guys play on Sunday, and they're not rookies. They're veterans, Kamara's on the back half of his career and has already set the Saints all-time touchdown record today. And we're talking about the last 2 times these teams played, he was the feature back. So I sure hope that we'll see these matchups more in the future, more conference games, because they are a treat. And this one certainly will be. So I'm actually going to go with a little bit of an upset here, a mild upset. I'm going to go with Texas A&M. I know it's a road game, but I did like what I saw out of them against Alabama. They look like a pretty complete team. And, they're still technically in it in the SEC West. They do have 2 losses, but like LSU, it was to an ACC foe. So the Aggies would need LSU to beat Alabama, and then A&M would need to beat LSU to close the year. So they're still in the race.
Yeah, A&M would definitely need some help. I do think that A&M's defense could definitely give Tennessee's offense some trouble. I was going to pick Texas A&M, but they're checkering Neyland. They don't lose in those games. I think that Neyland's going to be rocking Joe Milton this offense. Coming off of a fresh – I think that the bye week definitely helps them. It hurts Texas A&M. A&M is coming off of a very physical battle against Alabama. I think that's going to take a toll. I do think this one's close. But give me the home team. I think that Rocky Top gets a very big victory over the Aggies. And Chet, which way is he going to go to break up the tie? And he's going to go with Rocky Top. So 2 on Tennessee. Wade, this is where you can either gain or lose a point on us. So you're going to be the lone Aggie this week against the Volunteers. Let's move on. Now get into some of our primetime slots. So this is a huge matchup for both of these teams in the SEC East. Florida at South Carolina. Florida coming off of that big victory last week against Vanderbilt. South Carolina, I believe that they were on the bye, and they definitely needed that after a rough couple of weeks start. So who do you have between the Gators and the Gamecocks? The Steve Spurrier Bowl.
This one's kind of a toss-up to me. I think that we've seen both of these teams look really good, and then we've seen them look really bad. I'm going to go with the home crowd factor in this one. I'm going to go with South Carolina. I think it'll be close. I think could be kind of a moderate shootout. I'm going to take the Gamecocks on this one. I'll go 38-34.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too, is a moderate shootout. And the way, the both defenses are either up or they're down. I do think that South Carolina and Spencer Rattler coming off of the bye week, that also definitely helps them. I think that I'm just going to continue with picking teams that are fresh and coming off of the bye week, especially after a tough couple of games for South Carolina. I think that the home factor is definitely helped. If this was in the swamp, I would definitely pick Florida. But I'm going to go with South Carolina. I think that they're not really happy with themselves at their first couple of weeks. I think that Shane Beamer will get the squad ready to roll. Give me the South Carolina Gamecocks into like a 34-31 type of game. It's going to be close. And Chet, you're going to go the opposite way, go with us. And it's going to be all Gamecocks. All Gamecocks here for this one. So we'll see if he either comes back to bite us or if South Carolina can get it done for all three of us. So we will move on now to the Tiger Bowl. This is the second
back-to-back weeks, man.
Yeah, the LSU faces off against two Tigers. So we'll see if LSU can claim their stake that they are the real Tigers. So Auburn at number 22, LSU. And if you're looking for a game that's always close or a rivalry matchup that's always close, it's this one. And if you're looking for one that's a defensive battle, it's always this one. Maybe not this year, but we'll see. Auburn is another team coming off of the bye week. They were a player or two away from upsetting number one Georgia. They definitely looked very good. Offense looked a little bit shaky. Peyton Thorne in that game, he had a couple of rushing yards. We'll see if he uses his legs against LSU secondary, or does he stay in the pocket, and go after that? On the other side, LSU and their offense is absolutely rolling. So you're going to go with the home team Tigers, or are you going to go with Auburn to pull off the upset? And keep in mind, last time Auburn, they did come into Death Valley. They snapped that 20-year streak. So do you have Auburn getting back-to-back wins in Death Valley?
I don't. And I think the retro LSU defense shows up for this one. I think LSU holds Auburn to under 25 points. I think that's kind of a bold pick at this point based off what we've seen from LSU. But yeah, I think they hold Auburn to under 25 points, and I think they get into the 30s as an offense. So yeah, give me LSU in this one. I'll go 31-20.
I definitely agree with that. That was the exact same score I was thinking of. I'm going to break my trend. Past two games, I'm going with the team that's coming off the bye week. Not this week. Give me the home crowd. I think that this environment's definitely going to be electric. It's going to, especially if the temperature is the way it has been here in the state of Louisiana. But I think that LSU, I think that they get a statement victory here. Auburn, I've been impressed with them. I think that they're just a completely different team when they're at Jordan-Hare and when they're versus on the road. So I think that LSU, I'll go with your score. I agree with that. It's going to be like a 31-20 game. I think that Auburn's defense will probably, LSU hasn't really faced that type of defense that Auburn has provided. But I just think that this LSU offense has just been riding on momentum since that Mississippi State game. So I think that Jane Daniels, I picked him for a reason. I think that he's going to go off. So give me LSU to win this one. I think that they do it in a big way. Give me LSU to win this one by double digits. I know it's always close coming down to the wire, but there's something about, the way that LSU has been playing. I think that they're going to start a little bit of run before they go on the bye week. And Chet is also going to agree with us. He's going to go with the Fighting Tigers of LSU to pull this one off against Auburn. We do have one more game before we close the book here on week number 7. And this is another big game here in the SEC East race. Missouri at number 24, Kentucky. Both of these teams in need of a bounce-back victory. Missouri coming off of that loss against LSU. Kentucky coming off of the loss against Georgia. So who do you have bouncing back?
This one's so hard because Missouri impressed me a lot on Saturday. And honestly, had they won, we'd be talking about a top 20 team that's undefeated. And Kentucky got absolutely drubbed by by Georgia, but I'm going to go with the home crowd in this one and go with Kentucky. I think these teams are pretty evenly matched. I think it's just a tough road game at night. So yeah, I'm going to go with Kentucky in this one, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it go either way.
I think if you're an SEC fan, you got to turn on your TV on the SEC network and watch this one. I know myself, I'm definitely going to be tuning in to this one. This is definitely tricky. These are two evenly matched teams. I think that the way that these both teams got beat, Kentucky got beat pretty handily. Missouri lost in the final minutes of that game, so I think that this is going to be a close game, a defensive battle to start. Ray Davis on one side, Cody Schrader on the other, and you got talent all over. But give me the Cats. I think that they bounce back in this one. It wouldn't surprise me if Missouri does win this one off, but I am going to go with the home crowd at night at Kroger Field. I do think that Kentucky bounces back here in a big way. And Chet's going to go with Missouri. So he's going to either have a chance to get a point here as well. So only two disagreements. You went with Texas A&M. Chet went with Missouri. So we'll see how we do here in the picks in week number 7. So that is our week 7 preview. Before we close out the show and say our goodbyes, we will turn now to the hot topics. The first one being an injury. Alabama defensive back Malachi Moore left against A&M. He suffered an ankle injury. His status is questionable heading into this weekend's game against Arkansas. So we'll see if Malachi Moore is definitely going to be ready to go against the Razorbacks. All right, let's get into some question-based. We'll go on to the team that we were high on. But are we writing off Kentucky after their performance against Georgia?
Well, we're writing off their SEC East championship hopes. I mean, you have to beat the Dogs to win the SEC East. So, yeah, I'm writing them off in that regard, but not as a team. I think that they still have a lot to play for, and I think this team, they're playing for bowl positioning. Louisville is looking really good, so that could be a very good end-of-the-year matchup there in that rivalry. So a lot to play for, but, yeah, the East is done. I'm sure you would say the same.
Yeah, Kentucky just got a landmine on their schedule. The way that Louisville looked against Notre Dame, a very good performance against the Cardinal. I think that to answer our question based on our picks, Wade and I is a no. Chet is a yes since he picked Missouri to upset. Not really. Well, I guess it's an upset since they're ranked, but I think that both of them should be ranked. But who knows? So we are not writing off Kentucky even after the loss. The SEC East race pretty much over. 9 wins, I think, is still on the table for this team. So the next one, does Jaden Daniels deserve to be in the Heisman discussion, even with LSU having 2 losses?
Yeah, and I think he is in the Heisman discussion. You're just not hearing about him as much because of the 2 losses. But keep in mind, Caleb Williams won this game with his team not making the playoff without even winning their conference. So, there's room here. I think if LSU is sitting at 9-3 or 10-2 with a good game against Alabama that in particular he plays well in. I mean, if he has another Heisman level moment like he did last year against Alabama, I think that vaults him right into the discussion.
Yeah, I definitely think he does. I think that LSU could really only afford one more loss. If this is an 8-4 team, it's probably done for him. But if this is a team that wins out, goes 10-2, or just gets one more loss at 9-3, definitely could see him the way that he's been playing. I think that obviously Michael Penix is probably in the running right now, but Jaden Daniels is definitely right up there, especially the way that he's just been carrying the load for this team. All right, let's get into the last one. Which SEC team won the weekend?
Let's see. I got to go with Alabama. I think that they kind of got their image back, with the big win against Texas A&M. Like we mentioned, this was the second time where it was kind of trendy to pick against Alabama and go with an upstart team like Ole Miss or, Texas A&M in this case. So I think Alabama showed them who's boss and put themselves in the driver's seat yet again.
I'm going to go with Ole Miss winning the week. And I think that this was definitely the most trickiest spot for them, coming off of a big performance, took the life out of you pretty much. It could have been a letdown, could have lost to Arkansas, but this team fought and clawed their way to a 7-point victory. I think that Arkansas, the record isn't what's saying about this team. I think that Arkansas, is a good team. They're not, elite level team like, Georgia and the way that Alabama's been looking. But I'm going to go with Ole Miss. So who lost the weekend?
Probably Kentucky, just from
Yeah, I
a
agree.
morale standpoint, you know?
I agree. I think that Kentucky, if they, I was just looking for a competitive game, to lose 51-13 is definitely the ultimate losers of this weekend. So I agree with you. All right, that is it for our hot topics, and that is it for our show here in week number 7 for SEC Talk. We appreciate everyone coming in, dropping their likes on Facebook and also on YouTube. We definitely appreciate everyone spending their Sunday nights with us. We will be right back here next Sunday night, recapping week number 7 and looking forward to week number 8 as conference play is rolling right along. And we're getting closer and closer before we see two teams clinch a spot to face off in the ATL, to face off in the SEC championship for the 2023 season. So we hope you all have a great rest of your week, and we will see you back here next time here on SEC Talk. Have a good one.